All right, welcome to our Strixhaven sealed set review. It's in a lot of different places, so you don't get confused and think I'm talking about draft or constructed or commanded or vintage. But we're going to be looking over all the cards in the set, and then I'm assigning some evaluations to them. So to explain my evaluations, there's a key in the bottom right, but I'll sort of go over what it means. So a bomb means a card that doesn't just get... It's a really powerful effect that can't get answered by like a single removal spell. Like if you can be answered by a single removal spell, like, destroy target creature that costs 4 mana to destroy target creature. If you can be answered by that, then you're not a bomb, right? Like if you're cleanly answered. So generally, bombs are cards that make a lot of tokens, or they draw lots of cards, or even if you kill it, you get something out of it. So from here, my ratings are a little bit different than I've done before. Main deck, I'm going to rate between 6 and 9. And what that means is these are cards you're almost always going to play. Right? If you're playing these colors, you're playing these in your deck. You'll play all that you have. Now, when it comes to sealed, people who are familiar with playing sealed in the past know that generally when you're laying out your deck, and you put out all your cards that are bombs and all your cards that make your main deck, which are rated 6 through 9, you get about 20 cards, right? You get about 20 cards, but your deck typically needs to be 23 cards and 17 lands, right? So the last 3 cards are cards we call filler. Cards that you're not exactly happy to play, but you have to fill the last 3 slots of your deck. And so that's if I rate something in between 3 and 5, that means this is a filler card. So typically, if you're playing like a 2-color deck, or you're 2-color splashing another color, you typically have about 10 filler cards, and you need to choose 3 of them to put into your last 3 cards of your deck. And so that's what 3 to 5 is. And 1 to 2 is going to be relegated to sideboard cards. Now, this is kind of unique in this format because of lessons, which I'll get into, and that'll be the first thing I go into are the lessons. But sideboard cards are cards just like the way Magic sets are now designed. They don't actually just make stone unplayable cards, right? They just don't do it. Like a vast majority of cards are playable in some sort of situation, and so our new rating evaluation now properly talks about, okay, if it's a 1 or 2, it's a sideboard card. So now that we're talking about the ratings, now we can talk about what the packs actually contain. So this is a weird one. Okay? Packs contain 15 cards. Now, they don't have a land slot in this set. Instead, what they have is they have these archive cards, which are reprints of older Magic cards, which we'll get into later. So 1 slot in every single pack is going to be one of these archive cards. It could be an uncommon, rare, or mythic. One of the slots is a dedicated lesson card. So you're opening a lesson in every single pack. And it can either be a common lesson, a rare lesson, or a mythic lesson. There are uncommon lessons, but they will not appear in this slot. Then there's a dedicated rare or mythic slot, which you're certainly familiar with. Then there's 3 uncommons. Now, a lesson can appear... The uncommon lessons only appear in the uncommon slot. So you can, in theory, open a pack that has a common lesson and an uncommon lesson, or maybe even 2 uncommon lessons. I'm not sure what the current ones would be. They haven't revealed those yet. And then the last one would be 9 common. So 9 plus 3 is 12, plus 3 is 15, right? 1, 1, 1, 3, 9 is 15. Of course, there's also the usual 1 in 3 packs contain a foil. That foil can be any rarity, and it would replace a common. So, in theory, it'll never happen. In theory, you could open 24 rares or mythics in your 6-pack seal tag. It's not going to happen, but it's theoretically possible, not actuality possible. What is actually going to happen is you're probably going to open between 7 and 9 rares out of your 6 packs, and you are probably going to open between 7 and 9 lessons in your 6 packs. Now, lessons are cards, as we'll go into as our first thing. Lessons are cards that you don't put in your main deck, because you put them in your sideboard, not in your starting 40. You keep them in your sideboard, because there is a mechanic called Learn in the format that searches your sideboard for lessons and puts them into your hand. So unlike previous formats, because in previous formats there are basic lands, so if you open up 6 packs, it's 6 times 14, so there's 84 cards. In this format, it's very likely that you will have between 81 and 84 cards to choose from. So you're going to have a few fewer cards to look at to put into your main deck. Not sure how that's going to affect deck building, because we haven't tried it yet. The set hasn't come out yet. But I'm just commenting on how the pack composition is. So the first thing we're going to look at are the lessons. So the lessons, as I said earlier, they have a card type associated with them, which is sorcery - lesson, and these are cards that are typically pretty weak, and you don't want to main deck them, which is why I put it on the overlay. Don't main deck the lessons in the bottom left corner, because you want to keep them in your sideboard, so that any of your learn cards can go find them and put them in your hand. So these are cards I'll start going over them now. These are not going to be rated very highly. Elemental Summoning, 3, is it? I'm not sure. My apology for using Ravnica guild names. I'm actually not familiar with the Strixhaven, what they're called in Strixhaven. We'll call blue-red, just so I don't step on any toes. Create a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. This is like the definition of filler, because this is essentially 5 cost, no text, like 5 cost 4/4 no text, right? We call them Dirkwood boars. If you've been in Magic for a long time. Now there is a sort of like there's a new reworked prowess in this format that's introduced in this format that triggers off instants and sorceries. They give plus for some sort of effect. There's a backdoor chance that you might want to main deck this, but in reality, you would much rather keep it in your sideboard so that any of your learn cards can go find it, right? Because this is actually like a pretty decent card to find for a lesson. So I'm going to rate this as a 3, but be understanding that you should not be main decking these. This is a pretty good lesson. Because it's like almost good enough on its own. Almost. We can be 2.5 if you want to be pedantic. 2.5 could be fine. Alright, so next we have Fractal Summoning, which is X green blue. So it's X green or X blue or X green blue or what have you. Create a 0/0 green and blue fractal creature token, put X ++1 counters on it. So this is 2 mana, put it in your graveyard, 3 mana 1/1, 4 mana 2/2, 5 mana 3/3, 6 mana 4/4, 7 mana 5/5, etc. Definition of not a very good main deck card. This is very different rate than Elemental Summoning. It has a way better rate, right? Because in order to get a 4/4, you would have to pay 6 mana on this. Whereas the other one, you only have to pay 5. So it's a way better rate, which is actually what would make the other cards somewhat main deckable. This one is not. This is a straight sideboard card. Look, we're gonna put this at a 3. We're not gonna get into points yet. We're too early to get points. Alright, Inkling Summoning. 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying. For 1 white-black. So, look. I'm the type of person who I don't even think 3 mana 2/2s with no text that are flyers. Those are cards I would typically... Those are definition of filler cards. And this is like harder to cast. Right? Because if you're playing like a green-white deck, this is actually harder to cast than a 2 and a white card is. So... We're going to put this at 2. You should probably not... If you're playing this, you have other problems. This is about as bad as it gets. Pest Summoning, create 2 black and green pest creature tokens with, when this creature dies, you gain 1 life. There's a minor sub-theme of pests and a minor sub-theme of like gaining life in this format. But I would suggest not playing this. as all lessons are. These lessons evaluations are not going to be... They're not going to take very long. The benchmark for filler cards in the past have been 2 costs make a pair of 1/1s, and 4 costs make a pair of 2/2s. And those are the benchmarks on either side of this card that in the past have been like a rating of 3. A rating of 3 or 4 on those 2 cards that I just mentioned. This is like worse than both of those, right? It's worse than 2 mana make a pair of 1/1s and worse than 4 mana make a pair of 2/2s. Alright. Spirit Summoning. Create a 3/2 red and white spirit token. Okay, so hard to cast, 3 cost, 3/2, no text, right? Not where you want to be. So easy evaluation on 2s on these, but there's a reason for that, of course, because you're going to be searching for them with learner cards, which we'll get to later. Environmental Sciences. Now, this is unique. This, I think, is the only lesson out of the 20 lessons in the set. This is the only lessons you would actually probably main deck. So this is search your library for a basic land card, reveal it, and put it into your hand, then shuffle, gain 2 life for 2 colorless mana. I would actually rate this as a probably a 6. Either a 6 or a 5. I'm going to lean towards 6. Because this type of effect is not really something that you'd probably want to learn for, right? Whenever you play a learn card. Because if you can cast a learn card, then you already have mana. And you don't want to spend 2 mana over 2 mana land it. Very likely. If you have 2 or more Environmental Sciences, I would probably only main deck 1 and sideboard the other. So I guess that then by definition, probably 5 on this. We'll mark it as a 5. It's like the top end of the filler. That's probably a better evaluation. It's not a card you're always going to play in the main, because if you're a 2-color deck, you wouldn't play this, right? But it is the top of the filler. You could play this main deck in your 2.5-color, 3-color deck and not be embarrassing. I'm willing to believe this is closer towards 6 than 5. If we were to put points on evaluations, which we're not doing yet, but if we were to do that, 5.5 or 5.6 or 5.7 is probably where this would be. But this is a cool card. I'm glad it exists. Put 2 counters on target creature. It gains vigilance until end of turn. So there have been cards in the past. Let me see if I can remember what the name of the card is. Feral Invocation was the name of the card in the past. And I'll put it on the top right for you. Which was 2 and a green flash, enchant creature, gets+2/+2. Which is equivalent to having 2+1/+1 counters, right? And this was also flash, so if you attack with your 3/3 and your opponent blocks with a 4/4, you can enchant your creature and your guy stays big and you kill their creature when they block with it, right? So it's tricky. And Feral Invocation was a 3-rated card. You almost never played it in your sealed decks. So Expanded Anatomy, it's colorless, but it's a sorcery. So I'm gonna put this as pretty likely to be a 2. You might play this as a 3 again, and it's a sort of Magecraft strategy, but it's pretty doubtful. So exile target non-land permanent. Its controller draws a card. So if you are familiar with Call Time in the previous set, there was a card called Ravenform, which was very controversial, but I think people eventually came around to the fact that it was a rating of about a 3, right? Ravenform, 3 or a 4. Which was 2 and a blue, exile a creature or artifact, and your opponent gets a 1/1 flyer. Pretty clear, and the data has shown that Ravenform is a pretty medium minus card, right? You're not really actually very happy to have a Ravenform in your deck. Now, Introduction to Annihilation cost more, And I think your opponent drawing a card is worse for you than them having a 1/1 token. So it is somewhat closer to Secure the Waste, which is a little bit older of a card. It's not Secure the Waste. What was it? Was it Settle the Waste? I'm actually not remember what it was. Was it Secure the Scene? It was Secure the Scene. Is that what it was? It was Secure the Scene, right. Exile all target non-land permanent as controller makes a 1/1 white soldier token. So, and Secure the Scene was like a straight 3. 3 out of 10, right? You just almost never played this card. And Sealed. And Introduction Annihilation, I think, is a little bit worse than Secure the Scene, despite it being a colorless card. Your opponent drawing a card is gonna be better for them than having a 1/1 white soldier token. So I'm gonna put this as a 2. With a caveat, like, again, it is a lesson. You're going to learn for this card and not be unhappy. But what we're currently talking about is main decking it, and you're not gonna main deck this card. Introduction to Prophecy. Scry 2, then draw a card for 3 mana. Another card that you would not main deck, right? Historically, there have been cards that was, in previous sets, there was Deliberate, which was 1 on a blue, instant, scry 2, draw a card, and you didn't play that card, right? And this is a lot worse than that. Yeah, this is Preordain. Preordain is, I think, even banned. Is it restricted in Vintage and banned in Modern? Is that what it is? Preordain's a busted card. But adding 2 mana to it, not so much. Not so much. Alright, Containment Breach. 2 and a green. Destroy target artifact or enchantment if its mana value is 2 or less. Create a 1/1 black and green in Pest. Okay, so disenchant, sorcery speed. If it's small, which I don't even know how many small artifacts or enchantments are even in this set. Maybe probably equipment, if there are any. Yeah, not main deck. Obvious. Move on. Start from scratch. Choose one. Deal 1 damage to any target. Destroy target artifact. Definition of a sideboard card. So, nothing really special here. Necrotic Fumes. As an additional cost to cast the spell, exile a creature you control. Exile a target creature or planeswalker. Okay, I'm going to put this as a 3, just because, like, Bone Splinters is a card I almost never run. Village Rites and Bone Splinters are type, which were, like, actually, Spark Harvest you always played. I don't really want to compare to that. We're going to compare it to Bone Splinters, which was 1 black as initial cost, cast a spell, sacrifice a creature, destroy a target creature. This is a card I almost never run in Sealed. This is like a definition of like a 3 or a 4 power level card. And Necrotic Fumes is a bit worse. It's a cost 3 instead of 1. It kind of goes against the fundamentals of limited play, where you don't want to trade 2 of your cards for 1 of your opponent's cards. You can't do that very much and expect to actually have an expectation of winning the game. But maybe you can main deck this. If you didn't get any learn cards, maybe you main deck this. But pretty unlikely. You would have to have either 1 or fewer learn cards in your pool in order to justify wanting to play this. Yeah, it is weird that it exiles 1 of your creatures when your pests don't trigger, right? If they get... It says when this creature dies, not when this creature leaves play. So it doesn't even trigger your pest for like a gain life theme, which is also really weird. Alright. Mercurial Transformation. This is a doozy. Until end of turn, target non-land permanent, so yours or your opponent's, loses all abilities and becomes your choice of a blue frog creature with base power toughness 1/1 or a blue octopus with 4/4. So, first of all, understand that all the lessons are sorceries. Alright? There have been abilities like this in the past. There were instances that were somewhat playable in the main deck. This is a sorcery, so yuck, right? You can use this. For instance, you attack with your 2/2, they block with their like 5/5 or 6/6, and then post combat in your second main phase, you turn their creature into a 1/1, and it's to be a 1/1 with 2 damage on it, and then their creature dies. So it's like a pseudo Bone Splinters, right? It's a pseudo like sack your creature, kill a creature type of deal. But yeah. And you could, but and before combat, you can make your like 2/2 into a 4/4, or you can make your fractal, right? Because there's a fractal theme in the set. So the fractals are 0/0s that have counters on them to like to make like fake power and toughness. So if you play a Fractal Summoning for 4, you have a 2/2 Fractal Summoning, and you play Mercurial Transformation on it, it turns into a 6/6 until end of turn, right? But neither of these effects are things you want to be main decking. So this is the definition of a sideboard card. I'm just commenting on what the uses of this card. I think it's a good lesson card. The downside, of course, on it being when I say it's a good lesson card, the downside of all the learn cards is you have to reveal the card you search for. Right? So if you play a learn card, you reveal Mercurial Transformation, your opponent knows you have it, so why would they walk into that scenario that I talked about earlier, right? So it loses a lot of its luster if you can't make your opponents a 1/1 post combat without them knowing about it. So that's a weird one. If you target an aura with it, I guess that the aura just falls off. And then at end of turn, I'm not actually sure what would happen to an aura, whether they can choose which permanent to attach it to or just goes to the graveyard. It's a good question. Really not sure. Or are there 0 auras in this format? Well, we don't have to worry about that then. All right, we don't have to worry about that then. Don't worry about it. Reduce to memory, exile target non-land permanent. Its controller creates a 3/2 red and white spirit token. We just talked about Raven Form, about how Raven Form was pretty bad, and your opponent got a 1/1 flyer, and this gives him a 3/2, which is probably better than a 1/1 flyer. So no, you should probably not be main decking that one either. Look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them and put them into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in your random order. You gain 3 life. That's a yuck. That's a yuck for me. Commune with Nature was a 1 green card. Now look at the top 5, and that card was unplayable. Because you were too likely to miss. The odds of you hitting, I'll actually just look it up. Not going to show it on screen, but population size 40. You generally have like 13 creatures in your sealed deck. Your odds of hitting are about 92%, so about 1 in 10, you're going to brick on this. As if that wasn't bad enough. Yeah, you don't play this. Illuminate History. Illuminate History. Discard any number of cards, then draw that many cards. Then if there are 7 or more cards in your graveyard, create a 3/2 red and white spirit token. Okay, so this isn't totally embarrassing to play. Because maybe around turn 7, turn 8, turn 9, you can probably play this, discard 2 cards, and maybe get a discard 2, draw 2, and get a 3/2. All right, and that's like, in the past, there have been 2 red 4/3s that discard a card, draw a card, and they were pretty good. But those are pretty good because they were good statted, and you could just play them in turn 4. This is more of a card you can basically only play on turn like 5, 6, 7, or 8. But a 2, you don't want to be playing this. Kelden Raider, yeah. Confront the Past. Return target planeswalker card with mana value X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Remove twice the X loyalty counters from target. Yeah, obviously, card you would never play in the main deck. Teachings of the Archaics. You got to be careful with this card. If an opponent, first of all, it does nothing, right? Everything about this card is conditional. By default, it does nothing. If an opponent has more cards in hand than you, you draw 2 cards. So, I have 4 cards in Teachings of the Archaics. You have 7 cards. I play this and I draw 2 cards. Right? And then draw 3 cards instead if an opponent has at least 4 more cards in hand than you. So if I have 0 cards in hand except for Teaching to the Archaics, and you have 5 cards in hand, or 4 cards in hand, and I play this, I can draw 3 cards. Be careful with this card, because say I have 2 cards in Teaching the Archaics, and my opponent has 3 cards, I play Teaching the Archaics, my opponent has an instant. Goodness forbid they have an instant in their hand. They play it, you don't draw any, right? This is a card that you probably don't want to be main decking. I think it's, and the downside, of course, is it's a lesson that if you learn for it, your opponent knows you have it and they'll just empty their hand, right? Hopefully. So, is it in your hand when it resolves? No. It doesn't count itself. Academic Probation, choose one, choose non-land card name. Opponents can't cast spells with the chosen name. Okay, whatever. Choose target non-land permanent. And, oh, so it detains until your next turn. It can't attack or block. Alright, so it detains. Whatever. Obviously, you would never main deck this. Temporary effects like this are not what limited magic is about. And then, Mascot Exhibition. Create a 2/1 white and black creature token with flying, a 3/2 red and white spiritual creature token, and a 4/4 blue and red elemental creature token. So, this is the type of effect that would be perfectly reasonable to main deck. Perfectly reasonable to main deck. It's over 3 different bodies. Decent stats over 3 different bodies. 9 power over 3 bodies. Total, and it also is something like has some evasion attached to it. Totally reasonable card to main deck. However, it's actually such a good lesson that you're actually more incentivized to not play it main deck, because when you don't play it main deck, all your learn cards can go find it. So it's better to go search for this. So the effect is a type of effect you would not be unhappy main decking, but it's actually so good that you would rather learn for it. You're going to have more than 1 learn card in your deck. So, I mean, this is a 3, but be aware that you should not be main decking it. Actually, this to be fair, this is actually probably closer. This is probably closer to a 6. But again, don't main deck this. It's a 6, but don't main deck it. Yeah, if you have 1 or fewer learn cards in your deck, you should main deck this. But yeah, we're not gonna mess up the rating. We're gonna keep the rating simple. Obviously, it's 6 parentheses 2. That's a good way to think about it. All right, so that's gonna be it for lessons.